So you want to learn a little bit more about two of the hottest SUVs between BMW and Mercedes. How about the BMW X3 M40i and the Mercedes GLC 43 AMG 4Matic? Let's get talking, guys, now. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Mark with Exotic Car Play Place, and today, so to explain how close in statistics that these two vehicles are, let's compare some of the numbers. So how about the 2019 BMW X3 M40i? Comes with a fixed retail price of about $54,600, but on average most people pay more like $51,860. Now how about the Mercedes-Benz, the 43 AMG GLC? It comes with a whopping $62,500 MSRP, but it actually realistically sells more on average for about $60,100, making it a little bit of a premium over the BMW. So to compare how closely matched these two vehicles really are, let's compare the drivetrains. The BMW has the wonderful B58 inline-six single-turbo twin-scroll turbocharged engine that produces 355 horsepower and about 369 pound-feet of torque, while the Mercedes-Benz produces about 362 horsepower and about 380 pound-feet of torque from its V6 twin-turbo engine of about 3 liters displacement. Another subtle difference is BMW uses a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, while the Mercedes utilizes a 9-speed speed shift Mercedes brand in-house transmission. 0 to 60 times, how about 4.6 seconds for the X3? And 4.9 seconds for the Benzo. And fuel consumption, of course, not that many people care. This is the upscale performance version, but you can count on about 10 liters per 100 kilometers on the highway with the X3 M40i, as well as about 9.6 liters per 100 kilometers for the Mercedes GLC AMG 43. So let's start talking about the BMW first, and we'll get to the Benz. Now, the BMW, what is so special about the drivetrain? Well, in short, not a lot special other than it is a high-performance engine, and it's tuned up very strongly, of course. It's the predecessor to the wonderful N54 and N55 engines, but this engine can really be found in a lot of other cars like the 340, 440, 540 versions of all the BMW lineup, as well as the same engine that's utilized by the brand new 2019 Toyota Supra. Now, what about the driving experience of the BMW? Well, first of all, it doesn't take long. When you first start up the engine, you notice there's a pretty significant rumble out of the exhaust. As a matter of fact, that's probably the loudest point that you're going to hear the exhaust. It's very loud, actually, to the point where you might wonder if it's going to wake up the neighbors. That being said, once you're past the cold start, it settles out to a nice rumble. And what I really found interesting is how punchy this engine becomes, particularly when you hold the throttle full stab right to the floor. It doesn't take long to get that turbo right up to speed, and actually it has very, very impressive acceleration. Not to mention the exhaust popping out a pile of snap crackle pops on overrun. It just really does sound very sporty due to the sport exhaust that BMW fitted to the M40i. Now the handling, on the other hand, was very crisp. Overall, I found it handled very well, very car-like, and actually did a great job of taking the corners at a very flat rate. What I did unfortunately notice was some peculiar handling, particularly at highway speed. So if you had the steering wheel slightly off center and you floored it or you throttled the car, you felt like it was sort of torque steering, almost like the sensation you would get from a front-wheel drive car. It was sort of an odd feeling at times. I mean, otherwise the car tracked very straight, but it did have an unusual sort of drift at times coming from the front end. Now the interior is very nice, of course, in typical BMW fashion. Very high quality materials throughout. There's no shortage of, leather finish, high quality variable types of textures in some of the plastics. You had that amazing mood lighting, which really does add a certain ambiance to the whole interior. It has very nice controls, including optional gesture controls and some of the other features that really just make it pop. It really does feel upscale, particularly in the front section of the vehicle. As you move to the back section, you notice it sort of goes downscale a bit. You lose sort of some of the functionality between the seats there for the back passengers. There's less going on there. But either way, the quality materials is still very good. The other thing is an amazing panoramic sunroof, which also does a great job of allowing a lot of light in for the rear passengers, or if you like mood lighting from the stars in the sky if you decide to drive at night with the sunroof open. Now, some really great, amazing touches with this brand new BMW X3 M40i happens to be things because it is the sportier version. Although it's not a true M vehicle, it is in essence a sort of M touched. The M division really blew a little touch of their sparkly magic all over this new M40i. Now, of course, with that, you get a sport exhaust, sport brakes, you've got the variable steering, sport suspension, and possibly 20 or 21-inch upgraded rims as well. Now, I would recommend the 21-inch. It still does a great job of maintaining compliance on the ride, but the look of it is just second to none. Just really adds that pop for the overall look and the side profile of that car. Now, enough about the BMW. How does it really stack up about the Mercedes-Benz GLC 43 AMG 4Matic? Now, the Benzo, of course, has that really great rounded off styling consistent with all the other parts of the lineup. You know, it looks a lot like the C-Class, takes a lot of that, the contours from the C-Class cars, of course, as well, but more importantly, they do other little touches like those little star accents that you find in the front grille. Really makes it pop. It's a really sharp look in the front end. And overall, the car is really very attractive. Now, how about the drivetrain? We spoke about that already, producing the sort of power that it does. But it does this with a great set of turbochargers strapped to this 3-liter V6 engine that Mercedes has sort of worked over a little bit to produce a little bit more jam. As well, because it's a lightly blown on AMG car as well, what ends up happening is they've retuned a little bit of the all-wheel drive system. So the 4Matic is dialed in a little bit tighter, a little tauter than you would expect from a garden variety GLC. And due to the great powertrain and the dialed-in suspension and all-wheel drive system, this does a great job of composing itself, managing its heft, and as well just maintains an overall security and stability on the road that you would expect from a high-end Mercedes. Now, regarding the handling, this is one comment I would say after the drive in the Benz. I would say that even though the BMW has a bit of a tauter overall feel, slightly less lean, the Mercedes is a little more compliant and actually does a better job of quicker turn-in and does a better job of holding those lateral Gs. So really, in essence, it does a great job of sustaining its girth and weight in the corners, and in my opinion, is slightly better in confidence-inspiring handling over the BMW. Even the BMW is very crisp. The Benz feels more stable and more secure, and a lot of that is just its overall weight gives it a sense of extra stability. Now, of course, neither of which really quite match the Porsche Macan, but that's saved for another day. So the interior quality of the Mercedes feels vastly better than the BMW, believe it or not. Even though the BMW X3 does a great job of managing a lot of different materials, textures, it's still not quite up to the same par that the Mercedes does. The Mercedes just has an overall sense of far better quality, luxury, a better wraparound sensation, and even a lot of the switchgear is more stable. There's less movement, less wiggling in the controls and the buttons. The BMW, there's more of wiggle jiggle in some of the fittings, whereas the Benz just feels tighter overall. Tighter in fittings, tighter in door panels, tighter in the way all the buttons push down. Everything just feels a little bit tighter and better screwed together. So let's summarize all of this. And at the end of the day, I still can't help but say, even though the Benz felt very luxurious inside, the interior did sort of have a bit of a dark, cave-like feeling to it. A lot of the interiors, of course, were black finishing or dark gray. And then, of course, just the wraparound sensation and the low-slung roofline, everything just sort of portrayed this cave-like sensation, which wasn't quite as inviting in that regard as the X3. The X3 was a little bit more bright, more light, and with the mood lighting, it really made everything pop a little bit nicer that way. So it was a little bit more approachable and more inviting in the BMW. The other thing I would say is the Benz is very pricey for what it is. The BMW is actually quite pricey too, and I was a little shocked when I heard what the initial MSRP was for the BMW, but I was even more stunned to hear what the AMG 43 was on the Benz. Absolutely insane amount of money for this level of trim. So again, as summarized as well, the Benz overall had a better feel of quality. Everything fit a little tighter and snugger. Everything seemed of slightly better materials. and it looked like a little bit better attention to detail with the Mercedes. That being said, overall, when you move to the outside of the vehicle, you look at the back end of the X3 M40i, the back end just to me looked a little sportier. You look around the side with the 21-inch rims, it definitely looked sportier than the Mercedes. And even more importantly, the front end looked more edgy as well with the BMW. So overall, I would say styling goes hands down to me to the X3. Now that being said, we move along. How about the overall feel and sensation of each vehicle? Well, I would say the BMW did a great job of handling the ride. It was very charismatic. It was very crisp and nice to drive. The transmission did a great job of shifting on time. It always sort of predicted where you needed to be in the rev range. But on outright acceleration, they were very close. That being said, the Benz actually had a far more aggressive feel to it. From the harder shifting in Sport Plus mode, just the way they sort of dialed in the transmission settings, it shifted a lot harder, made it a lot punchier and more aggressive feeling when you're really on the throttle. As well as the Benz had a lot more aggressive exhaust note overall. Again, as I mentioned, the BMW had a really sharp exhaust sound when it was cold on cold start, but that quietened up quite dramatically. Meantime, the Benz actually sounded very aggressive throughout the entire time. So if you were in Sport Plus mode, for example, it really just howled. It had a real throatiness that the BMW just couldn't match. As well, there was other finishing touches that the Benz felt a little bit more aggressive, including the flat bottom steering wheel, which unfortunately wasn't heated, but the look of it looked more aggressive and more racy than the BMW. As well, as I summarized before, the AMG 4 GLC did a better job in the corners. I would honestly say the BMW, as well as they're known for handling, it handled very, very well. I just felt the Mercedes just felt a little more composed, and I felt a little more confident in the corners that the car would get me around the corner in one piece. So moving on to the transmission sense, what were they like? Well, BMW uses an 8-speed ZF transmission, whereas the Benz uses the 9-speed in-house speed shift transmission, which does shift very hard and fast, and in the Sport Plus setting was more aggressive and more hard shifting and just felt a little more intense than the BMW. That being said, outside of everything but the most intense shift setting, the BMW worked better. The ZF did a way better job of always matching the speed, putting you where you needed to be in the rev range. It just felt better suited in the BMW, the transmission ratios to the powertrain. So overall, they were both very close. They both brought something great to the table, but I would say for me, the BMW wins that contest. Now, in just outright acceleration, we touched on that. The Benz had more an intense feeling because of that hard shifting, as well as the throttle was a little bit louder. I mean, the overall exhaust note was more intense. But when it came time to put the numbers down on paper, I mean, I already mentioned 4.6 to 4.9, the BMW wins in 0 to 60. That being said, the Mercedes-Benz actually had a fatter torque curve. It felt fatter throughout the rev range. And so the BMW, when you were on the throttle and pushed it right to the top, it got up to speed in a hurry. But through just average driving and you want to do a quick pass, freeway speeds, the Benz actually felt like a fatter torque curve and was more usable in the mid-range. Now, as an overall summary, which one of these vehicles would I spend my $50,000, $60,000 hard-earned dollars on? Well, they're both great, and like I said before, some of them provide certain value where the other ones don't, and either way, they both do things very, very well. Some are more aggressive, some are better looking, some sound better, some handle better. There's a lot of things going for both of them. But because they're both very comparable, and it's a very hard choice between the two in terms of actual technical abilities, in all honesty, just because the predicted reliability on the new B58 engine in the BMW X3 M40i is great and looks to be good so far, everything's shaping up, I would honestly have to lean to the BMW this time, just on the sheer sake of the predicted reliability appears to be better in the BMW. Time will tell. So far, because their two vehicles are so new, it's hard to bet, but if I were a betting guy, I would honestly bet on the BMW for the reliability in this situation with this new engine. So I really hope you enjoyed the video, everybody. I hope that shed some light on it for you. My personal take on it, I shared some of the specifications on these great new SUVs. Very fun, very fast. Just because you have an SUV doesn't mean it has to be boring. These ones spice up life again and bring utilitarian back to sports all day long. So make sure you give it a thumbs up, like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that little notification bell beside the subscription button. That way you know when the next great video is out. Hope to see you guys on the next one. Love to catch you then. Bye-bye.